And we're back. And this time, it is late enough in the evening here at Cristo Rey that I actually don't have to be in Mr. Murray's office. I am sitting at my desk, and it's all quiet because, frankly, pretty much security is going to probably kick me out soon. So let's move through this a little bit more quickly than we did last time. First set for tonight's homework, we had George Washington's farewell address. So again, before we even read this, before we even start looking at the questions, we should be thinking, oh, George Washington, first president, was leaving, was warning us, and giving that first farewell address. And we remember that he also warned us of some things. He warned against political parties. He warned against making foreign alliances. He wanted national unity. So knowing that, going into this, let's see which of the things it's focused on. And just even quick glances, we see lines like foreign nations, that Europe has already set a primary interest, which to us have none or a very remote relation. So they have their own thing going for us that we don't have to get involved with. Cool. So clearly this is talking about an excerpt from his warning about foreign alliances. Let's look at 24. The concerns expressed by Washington were a response to, well, definitely nothing about the treatment of Native Americans. A is out. Dispute over possibly annexing Canada from Great Britain. No mention of expansion, no mention of Canada. That's definitely not it. Controversy regarding support for the revolutionary government of France. That kind of sounds like something that Europe has some interest in that don't have anything to do with what we're doing, right? So that seems maybe it. But let's just see. D, conflict with Great Britain over the treatment of American loyalists. No. C is the right answer. 25. Strongly influenced which foreign policy decision? In the 20th century. So these are one of those questions that might come up where we're talking about something that was written in 1796, but their history is a continuum, right? So we need to see how this relates to something that happened later. So if we're trying to see that this excerpt is clearly talking about Washington's warning of joining of foreign alliances, entangling ourselves in foreign affairs, let's then look at these options and see what happened. So the establishment of the United Nations, opposite of that, right? So that's not it. The formation of the NATO alliance between the United States and Western Europe in 1949. That again is also kind of opposite, right? We formed a legitimate alliance. That's not what he's talking about. The refusal to join the League of Nations, that sounds about right. We did not want to get caught up in all of the post-World War I bonanza going on over there, and we refused to join that alliance. That's kind of what caused all these problems anyway, but that refusal was in line with what Washington said. So we know even just right there, C is the right answer. Lastly, which of the following groups most strongly oppose Washington's view? Now for this is kind of one of those content questions, like really brushing back those cobwebs. If we can remember, right, we can think back to Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Alexander Hamilton was Washington's protege. Jefferson was, a friend, but also like a frenemy, right? Had a different way of thinking about things. And he definitely supported the revolution in France. He thought that it was our duty to encourage others to embrace this democracy and embrace revolution just like we did. All those kind of like Enlightenment ideas that Jefferson loved so much. Hamilton and Washington, on the other hand, were much more focused on building a strong federal government here, and kind of curbing any of those rebellions and revolutions that would get in the way of our progress as a new nation. And if we can remember, Democratic Republicans was what Jefferson ended up running in 2 election cycles later. So, answer is A. That one might be a little bit tricky for folks. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments. Okay, 27. Most historians would argue that the recommendation of Washington's address ceased to have a significant influence on the United States foreign policy as a result of... So, what's this question saying? It's saying, okay, when did our refusal to do foreign alliances kind of go out the window? Like, when did we stop listening to this? And if we think about it, when was it that we started embracing foreign alliances, aka joining the United Nations, joining NATO, all those types of things? After World War II, right? So our involvement with the Second World War, really was a turning point for our foreign policy. And even if you look at that, right, westward expansion, that's us just expanding our country and staying on our own. Woodrow Wilson was, he had created the idea of the League of Nations in sea, which would support international democratic principles, but we didn't accept it, so that's not a turning point. And then support for Cuban revolutionaries, that's probably the trick one that they would want you to say, but really that still didn't turn us anywhere, right? We still stayed, we hesitated getting involved in World War I, then turned really isolationist. So like the thing that made this actually cease to be gone for good would be D, involvement in the Second World War. Now, for this guy, we're clearly reading something that was written in 2001 about the American colonies. This is a historian's perspective. But when we think about the colonies, we know that he's going to be talking about something that happened way, way, way back that we would have talked about in Unit 1 or Unit 2. And as we quickly just even are looking over this, we're seeing a lot of the stuff, right? Like crops. We're seeing what was produced in these different places. So we're thinking real early. So let's see. Export of New World crops to Old World transformed European society. Okay, New World versus Old World. Let's just remember that New World is the Americas, Old World is Europe. So these, if we don't remember all the way back to then, might be a little bit tricky. So we have improving diets and thereby stimulating population growth. That's the correct answer, but you may not think of that originally. Let's get back to that in a second. Let's try to narrow down what for sure is not right. Encouraging enclosure of open lands and pushing workers off of farms. That doesn't totally make sense to me, right? Like, why would that have an influence out in Europe? Maybe you could argue, oh, well, they're getting goods from America, so farmers don't have a job anymore. But they still need the stuff they have been producing. It's just that they're adding a diversity of things. So that's not going to be it. Promoting greater exploration of the interior of the American continents. So while European society was intrigued about coming to America and exploring what was happening, they still wanted to remain on the coast, right? Like, this is real early. So we didn't have any of the means of getting things anywhere unless we were by a waterway. So the interior aspect of here really is the thing that should kick you off as, no, they weren't looking to do the interior. They were looking to expand along waterways, along the coast. So that doesn't seem right. And then fostering conflicts among major powers over access to new food supplies. Now, this seems like a good answer, right? Because you could say, oh, well, that makes sense because Spain and France and Amsterdam and England were all kind of competing for colonial land, and maybe that was because they wanted new food. But it really was more than the food, right? That wasn't the key source. So while none of these really feel that great, the answer is going to be A, because we're looking at, okay, this is talking about how it transforms society, the people living in Europe. So having these new diets that were much more diverse than the things that they're getting over there, that's going to be a societal change. That's not going to be a kind of political or economic change. That's going to be a societal change. So that's going to be the thing that fits best. The patterns described in the excerpt most directly foreshadowed which of the following developments. Now, if we are hearing about crops and we're hearing about goods, we can immediately think crops, who's going to do the work? These white people aren't going to do it, so they try to find other people. Who do they try first? The Native Americans. So, oh wow, I just noticed a really big typo right there. That's so crazy. I didn't notice that at first. Sorry, saying was 29. So, they needed other people to do the work. And who were they using at first? The Native Americans, right? And what happened? They all got smallpox. They all started dying. So even without looking at the answers, we're going to think, okay, that's one of the biggest effects of this all happening. Let me see if that's in here. And look, B, the population decline in Native American societies. That really feels like the best answer here. So, and it is. Great. Now, 30. The trends discussed by Taylor most directly illustrate which of the following historical developments in the Atlantic world. And that new crop, old crop, boom. He's talking about the Columbian Exchange. And what do we see right here? Done. Easy. Move on to the next one. Now for these guys, they're all looking at this map. Now, you may have recognized this because I'm 95% positive that I put this on one of your tests. So, limit of settlements. So, what that means is that up to 1700, these dark areas, that was as far as any settlements went. That was as far as people lived in up to 1700 in the 13 colonies. Now, up to 1750, we started seeing this like kind of darker gray, but not quite light gray, right? So that means that people were living in all of the darkest gray and all the way out into this middle gray. So that means that that middle gray up into the coast was where folks were living up until 1750. Now, up until 1775, what's happening around then? Oh, French and Indian War, conflict over the Ohio River Valley, wanting to move west towards that Appalachian Mountains, and then running into problems with the Native Americans, and then remember the Proclamation of 1763, and then the Great Britain agreeing to not have Americans move west of the Appalachian Mountains because they didn't want to get in trouble with the Indians, but everyone in America was like, no, we want to go west. So we see this, right? All of this is coming back into our mind because this light gray up until 1775, we were pretty west. There were still colonists living pretty far out, which is all leading up to problems with the American Revolution and this frustration with Great Britain after the French and Indian War about that Western expansion. So before I'm even looking at those questions, those are all the things in my head that are going through and that I'm kind of anticipating that there are going to be questions about. And look, the map most directly depicts the inland, you can't really see that. The inland expansion of colonial population. They're not talking about anything else other than settlements, right? Where are they living? How far are they going west? Perfect. Inland, moving into the land, not towards the coast. Pattern of colonial settlement up to 1700 resulted most directly from which of the following factors? So, again, we just talked about this in the one for Alan Taylor's piece, right? This idea that, like, to be able to trade at this time, because we were not robust in our technology, we needed to be right on the water to put our crops, to put our trade gear into a boat and send it over. So we needed to be on the coast. So this pattern of colonial sentiment is not talking about the relative size of the Great Britain population versus the American Indian population. That doesn't have anything to do with that. The British recognition of Native American sovereignty, we would never do that, so we know that's off. But the orientation of the British colonies towards producing commodities for export to Europe, we know the British colonies solely existed because of mercantilism, the idea that we would produce stuff that went back to the mother country and then we would have to get the mother country's manufactured goods. So to do that, we needed to be right on the coast. And up into 1700, where were we? Pretty much only on the coast. This way, we were serving our mother country as best we could. So C. 33. The change in settlement patterns had which of the following effects? We already talked about this when we went over the map, but it's going to be that increase in conflicts between British settlers and American Indians. As we kept moving west in between 1700 and 1775, we're going to keep running into problems with the Native Americans that were living out west, and that's going to cause some conflict. Now, you can say maybe a decrease in the coastal population, but no, right? There's nothing on there that would say that that decreased. There was no numbers that said that as we moved west, the population on the East Coast went down. We have nothing to back that up other than they're trying to trick you saying like, oh, everyone moved west, so no one was living on the coast. They're trying to trick you. Don't fall into that. There are no numbers to back that up. Plus, we can even just think about it, right? Like Boston was a hugely populous city in 1775. Otherwise, we would not have had the success in the Revolution if we did not have very populous coastal cities. So that is not it. And then any of this other stuff are just throwaway ones. 34. Changes in settlement patterns from 1700 to 1775 best explains the and which of these, right? So I have 20 seconds to wrap this up. D. Growth of social tensions between backcountry settlers and coastal elites. We're going to see as we continue going through that moment of being on the coast versus being in the country and having to face problems with the Indians is going to be something that is really tenuous with each other. Okay, watch the next one.